Hello, welcome to the forest. It's a Frankly Harry podcast. This is your host, Frank Weber. As always, I'm delighted that you could join me today and listen to some of my insights. I just have a quick announcement real quick. In case you didn't know, I have restarted my written Substack column. I think I'm going to be doing it at least once a week, possibly twice a week. I'm not sure how far I can really push myself on that, but just be on the lookout for that. I've tried to make it a little shorter and more concise. And the first one will be released tomorrow, which is September 5th. I know this podcast will be a couple of weeks out, but just wanted to pass that along to you. Today I have a little bit lighter-hearted topic, but still an important one that I thought I would discuss with you a little bit, and maybe if we have time, I'll just kind of shoot the breeze and tell some more stories. Actually, this has a lot of stories involved in it right here. But I listen to a number of other podcasts, as you probably know, and one of them is Club Random with Bill Maher, and a lot of times he, if you listen to him enough, he'll repeat things several times, even if you don't necessarily agree with him. One of the more tame things that he said, but I tend to agree with, is that he believes that comedy has changed over time. Now, he didn't really specify whether he was talking about stand-up or TV or movies, any kind of comedic entertainment. I think he was really just talking in general about it. And I tend to agree with him on that. But there is one problem, and it's a big problem in my mind, is that I feel like my sense of humor has never changed, while comedy has. And we can always speculate on a lot of reasons as to why comedy has changed over the years. I know one of them that I'm going to get into in just a second is... I'm not going to talk about political correctness per se, but I think that's definitely one of the reasons that comedy has changed in my lifetime. And then perhaps a feeling that a lot of people are not quite as happy-go-lucky as they used to be, not quite as relaxed. I think there's a real tension around a lot of folks and wondering where their futures and their family's future is going to go. So I began to explore this topic, my sense of humor, and I really need to let it out more on this show somehow or another. Still working on how exactly to do that. But I love stand-up. I don't know, most good stand-up has changed that much over the years. Maybe, maybe not. I don't really have a lot of great reference points, although some of the legends... like Rodney Dangerfield or George Carlin or Richard Pryor. I mean, we'll probably never have people like that again, I can tell you. But certainly in other modalities, it's definitely changed. When I was like 12 or 13, I always tell this story here. I was sort of a troubled child, I think. Still kind of a troubled adult, too, I believe. But I went to a counselor, a psychologist, a shrink, if you will. And he was very... I liked him. I liked talking to him, but he could get very... he could dig down on a lot of topics. I think that he didn't like me... he didn't like me using stereotypes, which is true. You shouldn't use stereotypes, but... there is usually a small amount of truth in stereotypes, and that's why they become popular. And then he didn't like me talking about conspiracies or conspiracy theories. However, they do exist. They don't always involve death. They usually involve some kind of politics, though, and some agenda and trying to move somebody out of one position into another and stuff like that. But he sounded, of course, like a lot of people do these days, and dismiss certain arguments as conspiracy theories. Anyway, getting back on topic about comedy and humor, I think there was a time in the No, hold on a second. I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So my sense of humor, I love stand-up, like I told you. I like slapstick, outrageous, off-the-wall comedy. It could be Airplane, Naked Gun type movies. Could be Mel Brooks movies, whether it's Blazing Saddles or Spaceballs or History of the World. I really liked Steve Martin movies, some of them anyway, before he kind of got a little bit more serious than I would have liked him to. Anyway, that's my sense of humor. TV shows, by the way, Three's Company, Dukes of Hazzard, Night Court. I have a little Night Court story here in a second. But anyway, I'm talking to him one time about, this is probably 1989 or 90, and I'm 12, 13 years old. And apparently the Dukes of Hazzard were on in syndicated reruns for a few years after they ceased production. And then they actually stopped being shown around 89 or 90, and then were not picked up again until about 96, I think, or so, but when they got picked up by TNN and got real popular again, and then they had a couple of reunion movies. Anyway, you know, the story behind that was that somebody told me one time, and I could never verify this, but they said Bill Cosby bought the show because he thought it was racist or something. But I could never verify that, and it just sounded like a bunch of bullshit. But anyway, I'm sharing the fact that they left the air with my counselor, and he said, like, well, I believe our sense of humor has changed. Our collective sense of humor in the United States has changed, and that was his reason for why it was no longer on the air. And, of course, I probably pleaded my case, even as a young man, that, well, my sense of humor hasn't changed, and that's a problem because you're putting new and different stuff out there that I don't find to be quite as entertaining. And one of the things I just wanted to point out, an example here. Did I get all this here in a second? Oh. So around 1990 or so, this is actually a little bit before I think political correctness and all that really set in, but I'm a big fan of the old Night Court sitcom. The new one's okay, but the old one, of course, sets the standard. It was very slapstick, off the wall, pretty outrageous and very dry humor. And there was always, of course, a moral at the end usually involving Judge Harry Stone. And the reruns, of course, are being shown at a fairly rapid pace, it seems, in the series on the IFC channel the last few months. And absolutely love the first, it was on like 8 or 9 seasons, probably love the first 6 or 7. And then when they got to around 1990, it seemed to become a little less slapstick and start taking on a more serious tone. I saw one where they apparently were satirizing the Andrew Dice Clay controversy from way back then. If you were listening and were around, he was I guess sort of an insult comic. Not exactly like Don Rickles or anything like that, but he said some things that were disparaging to some women, and Lorne Michaels got him to host Saturday Night Live in the spring of 1990, and a couple of the female cast members walked off the set. And so that year, probably by that fall, Night Court did this show where there was a very unfunny comedian who was using various ethnic groups and people with disabilities and stuff like that, basically all sorts of using them as the butt of his jokes. And he was a very unfunny guy, and whether that's right or wrong, they were obviously disparaging Andrew Dice Clay, who I've never really been a super big fan of, but the guy is pretty outrageous and takes risks and You can say whatever you want to about him. I think the controversy has long died, but the fact that Night Court made a show there that seemed to kind of disparaging him was a real disappointment. And I kind of think some of the later seasons there, they really took some risks on the show, socially speaking, maybe even a little bit politically, that I think shouldn't have happened. And so that was another instance of the humor changing. And then, of course, a few years later, if you listen to this show at all, I really thought that political correctness really started to sink in about 93 or 94, and there we have it. And my favorite TV shows and movies, we still have them from yesteryear, but there's nothing new that seemingly is being made in that same vein anymore. And it's a very big loss. It's very frustrating to me. And what's a guy to do about it? I really I have no idea. It's kind of like I've just it's sort of like wandering out at sea or in the desert for all these years, hoping that people could produce something like that again, because I really believe there's a market for it. I certainly am part of that market. I don't know where it's all gone. Mel Brooks hasn't done really a feature theatrical film since the time he teamed up with Leslie Nielsen in the Dracula Dead and Loving It movie, which was not a very good movie. But that was in 96 or 97, and he's largely kept himself busy with other things since then. So I'm getting nostalgic, but I have a problem here that I really wish I could solve, and maybe I could solve it, as I'm getting into more creative endeavors and trying to have my kind of humor, my sense of humor sort of resurrected and coming out and bubbling out of the my mouth, I guess you could say. Anyway, one other point that I'll make before I close this topic. I do find it really interesting. Most entertainment modalities these days seem to depend on what we call, sometimes jokingly, but sometimes seriously, the demographic. Means that they're usually tailored toward what people in the 18 to 34 age range like. And the weird thing about the stories that I just told you is I didn't turn 18 until 1995, and so I wasn't even in the demographic before they kind of changed things on me. It's a really bizarre story. And then nowadays, now that I'm in my 40s, I'm no longer in the demographic either. But usually when you get over 40, you're the one who's paying the bills most compared to those in their 20s and 30s. And yet you don't have any say in what the best entertainment is out there in the world. So anyway, if you have any, of some shows that are really great, outrageous, slapsticky, just laugh out loud, rolling on the floor funny, by all means, pass those along to me. I've said over and over again, this is an interactive show, and I would really love it for you to comment and just interact with me here. Losing my train of thought. So anyway, we've got a few minutes left. I'm not going to go on too long. We got some good weather today in Canyon. Finally cooling off in the 80s, and still got the neighbors across the alley working on some deck, and workers blocking my alley, which I really don't like, and trucks in the shop, may get it repaired. Looks like we're going to probably get it repaired, but may have to sell it. Lots of things going on here. Very much in a transitional stage. Was thinking about what to do with my dental license as it comes up for renewal here in a couple of months, and I don't think I can go back to dentistry. I just think was too hard on me, and it's hard to explain that to folks who have never really been in it, don't know what it's like to be a part of that, and are usually saying to themselves, "Oh wow, dentistry, sounds terrible and scary, disgusting, or whatever." But I mean, it's a real bugaboo for me. I don't, and I feel like I should be doing some kind of work, and I am doing work on this and my writing and trying to write books and everything, but it's slow coming, and I don't seem to have a lot of guidance and everything. So anyway, if you could lift up a little thought or a prayer for me, and maybe have a little suggestion or whatnot. I think I'm going to open the comment section here on when I publish this podcast here in a couple of weeks. So anyway, I'm just going to close it here a couple of minutes short, and I thank you as always for joining me. Again, by all means, let your friends and family know about me. Hit the subscribe button, and as always, just thank you again for joining me and in the forest once again on It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. I really love you and appreciate you. Thank you. Bye till next time.